The most memorable birthday gift. In the middle of May, an incident took place that would have faded from memory if it weren't for recent events that brought it back to the forefront. Today, I share not just a snapshot from my life, but a story with a continuation. Let's rewind to the middle of May, when it all began. May was characterized by persistent rain, making it impossible to venture outdoors. That's why I found it surprising to see Ruslan, the neighbor boy, aimlessly wandering the yard instead of being indoors. Allow me to tell you a bit about Ruslan. He is a well-mannered, polite, and positive schoolboy living with his mother, Karina, in our building. None of the neighbors have a bad word to say about him. Though they empathize with his situation, they express it discreetly, knowing that his mother faces challenges raising him alone. They lend their support in subtle ways, like sharing their Wi-Fi password with Ruslan. Consequently, on pleasant days, he often sits on the bench near the entrance, making the most of the opportunity to access the internet on his tablet. In May, I was taken aback to see Ruslan without his tablet, strolling around the playground and absent-mindedly kicking a forgotten plastic cube. Initially, I caught a glimpse of Ruslan through my window, but paid little attention. However, after an hour or so, he was still there, and even as the rain approached, he kept glancing at the windows and continuing his aimless walk. Unable to ignore it any longer, I grabbed a garbage bag and headed to the yard, using the excuse of taking out the trash as a means to coincidentally meet Ruslan. "Hey Ruslan, why aren't you with your tablet?" I began cautiously, trying to capture the young boy's attention. "Hello, Petrovich," Ruslan replied politely, extending his hand towards me. "I forgot it at home." "Why are you lingering here? It's about to rain, can't you see? The wind is already picking up. Why don't you go home?" I inquired. "I can't go home right now," Ruslan responded briefly before adding, "I don't even know how long I'll be here. My phone is dead, and I don't even know the time." "Well, if you can't go home, let's go to my place. You can tell me why you're here and why you can't return home," I suggested confidently. "No," Ruslan protested. "I have a reason for being here. I'm keeping watch over the entrance." "Fair enough, you can observe everything from my kitchen window. I'll seat you at the table beneath the window, and you can keep an eye out," I said with a smile. "Okay, but only for a little while," Ruslan agreed, and together we walked towards the entrance. It was evident that Ruslan desired to go indoors, as the intensifying wind was causing his windbreaker to flutter about. Yet my curiosity grew. Throughout my acquaintance with their family, things had always appeared fine. There were no public quarrels or any signs of discontent that the neighbors could perceive. Karina never brought men to her place, nor did her friends. She focused on her home and her son, devoting all her free time to them. You can imagine how intrigued I was at that moment. Whenever behavior deviates from the norm, it becomes intriguing. As promised, I settled Ruslan in the kitchen at the table beneath the window, where he promptly fixed his gaze, essentially monitoring the entrance. It wasn't his first visit to my place, but our encounters typically occurred in my home office. When he was younger, he would run in to examine the globe or flip through my travel books. However, as he grew older, he seemed less comfortable visiting, so we exchanged only a few words in passing within the yard or the elevator. "Seems like you've completely forgotten where I live," I remarked while preparing the kettle. "You should drop by sometimes, without any specific reason, just for a chat. There are still so many stories I haven't shared, the ones you enjoy, like the time I worked as a trucker." "Oh, Petrovich, you won't believe it, but I don't have time for that right now," Ruslan said, briefly glancing at me before returning his attention to the window. "I'm growing up, and my interests are changing." "Is that so?" I exclaimed with a smile. "And what interests you now, if I may ask?" "Well, it's still a secret," Ruslan replied conspiratorially. "But if everything works out, all the neighbors will find out at once. I really hope it does." "Whatever it is you're up to, it's clear that you're determined," I noted, placing a plate of cookies and marshmallows on the table. But remember, if you ever need help, you can count on me. I'll assist you in any way I can. I don't know if it was my openness and willingness, or if Ruslan recalled the trust we had developed over time, as he had shared his secrets with me, but he decided to disclose his heartfelt story. Thus, over a delightful cup of tea accompanied by cookies, with intermittent glances out the window, Ruslan revealed something known only to him at that time. Listen, Petrovich, I'll tell you something, but promise me you won't tell anyone yet, all right? If everything works out, everyone will know. But if it doesn't, nobody needs to find out, okay? 2 days ago, I celebrated my 13th birthday. As usual, a month prior, my mom inquired about the gift I desired. You see, Petrovich, I listen to my classmates, and they don't hide their wishes. They say, for my birthday, I'm asking my parents for this and that. And each passing year, answering that question becomes increasingly challenging for me. As I grow older, I realize how difficult it is for my mom, especially since she's alone. What could I ask for? Sure, I need a computer, but how can I ask for one? If it were possible, my mom would have bought it for me. Besides, we've been renovating our place since the beginning of the year. My room was redone, and we got new furniture. So what kind of gift could I request now? However, this year, I was better prepared than ever for my mom's gift inquiries. I had a plan that I had been working on for almost a year. You know, Petrovich, even my grandparents say it's tough without a man in the house. My grandfather often mentions that if he lived nearby, he would lend a hand with tasks requiring a man's touch. Sadly, they live quite far away, and we only communicate over the phone. But I can see how challenging it is for my mom. When I was younger, I used to ask about my dad. My mom would never respond, and then she would retreat to her room, where I could hear her silent sobs. Eventually, I stopped asking questions. However, I yearn for a dad. Everyone around me has fathers, while I'm the only one without a father figure. I'm not even referring to my biological father from the TV programs my mom. Rewritten version. I gingerly began to hint to my mom, suggesting that it would be nice to have a man in the house. I also expressed my own desires, hoping that having a father figure would bring happiness to both my mom and me. You can't imagine how much I yearn for it. However, my mom always responded by saying, Ruslan, you're the best young man. You'll grow up and become a real man, but not just yet. I understood her perspective, but I couldn't wait any longer. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. Since the beginning of the school year, we've had a new security guard at school named Valentin. Perhaps because I viewed all men as potential stepfathers, or maybe because there was something special about Valentin, I noticed him immediately. I started observing him and noticed that he didn't smoke. Instead, he sat at his post, engrossed in crossword puzzles and books. I made it a point to get to know Valentin better. It wasn't suspicious at all since he was quite sociable and often chatted with the boys. Over time, I discovered that he was just a year older than my mom, unmarried, childless, and lived alone. It took me months to gather this information discreetly, asking subtle questions. I became increasingly convinced that Valentin was the type of father figure I wanted for myself and as a husband for my mom. But the hardest part wasn't gathering information. It was bringing Valentin and my mom together. My mom staunchly refused to entertain the idea of dating. She once had a cousin's brother introduced to her by her friend Aunt Valia. And my mom's response was, who knows how he'd treat Ruslan? I'd rather be alone than risk any harm to my child's well-being. How could I argue with my mom? I hinted and expressed my readiness to have a man in the house and a father figure in my life. But all my efforts were in vain. However, this time I had a trump card up my sleeve. After the New Year's break, I gradually revealed my plans to Valentin. I started by showing him pictures of my mom and me on my phone, asking how she was doing. It was clear that Valentin was intrigued, and I suspected he had an inkling about my intentions, although he never mentioned anything. Week after week, we grew closer. About a month before my birthday, I asked Valentin if he would like to give me a birthday present. When he gave me an affirmative answer, I knew part of my plan
that remained
was the most challenging part, talking to my mom. As usual, she approached me 1 month before my birthday, asking what gift I wanted. She always asked in advance to assess how much money she needed and would either buy or borrow it. But this time, I told her I wanted something intangible. Intrigued, she asked me to explain. I told her that instead of a physical gift, I wanted her to invite some friends over, and I wanted her to be present too. So the gift would be a table set with delicious food and her joyful company. I mentioned that 3 friends would come. A week later, I informed her that 1 friend couldn't make it, leaving us with 2. And a week before my birthday, I let her know that only 1 friend would attend. Since my birthday fell on a weekday, we decided to celebrate it on the weekend, which was today. On my actual birthday, my mom and I sat together, enjoying a cake. She was worried that I might feel disappointed about having only 1 friend present instead of 3. Little did she know, I had never intended to invite 3 friends. If I had said I was inviting only 1 friend, it would have seemed suspicious. So this morning, my mom was in the kitchen, eagerly awaiting my guest. She had prepared an abundance of treats, dressed up nicely, and, anyway, when the doorbell rang, I rushed to open it. As Valentin removed his coat, I quickly went to the kitchen and told my mom that it was time for her gift. While she was surprised and struggled to comprehend, I said, "A guest has arrived, and I want you to spend at least 3 hours with him. I'm going out for a little while. I'll return when you've seen him off." Without giving my mother a second thought, I threw on a windbreaker, slipped on my sneakers, and instructed Valentin to join me in the room before running outside. It seemed like I had thought of everything, that everything was going as planned. However, I hadn't considered where I would go. So I ended up spending the night outside, as they say. I hadn't even thought to bring my tablet. "Listen, you mentioned that your phone's battery is low," I began after listening to Ruslan's story. "Why don't we put it on charge? If my mom tries to reach you and can't get through, she'll be so worried, won't she?" "Let's do it," Ruslan replied cheerfully. "It's completely dead. It won't even turn on right away. Let it charge for at least 10 minutes, and then I'll switch it on to see if my mom tried calling." "Let's head to my office," I suggested. "I have a charger there." "I can't," Ruslan protested. "I have to keep an eye on Valentin, and I might miss something. You can do it yourself. I'll stay here." I returned from my home office just a few minutes later, and Ruslan was happily munching on another cookie. I had been invited to a friend's birthday party and bought them a lovely quartz watch as a gift. While Ruslan's phone was charging, my gaze fell upon the watch box. An idea struck me instantly. I'll buy another watch for my friend in time, but for such an understanding guy who sacrificed his own gift to set up a meeting between my mom and Valentin. "Ruslanchik," I began, returning to the kitchen. "Even though your birthday was a few days ago, you're celebrating it today. That means it's not too late to wish you a happy birthday, right?" "Right," Ruslan responded, sounding confused. "You see, it's funny how your phone died, and you couldn't tell the time," I continued with a smile. "And you're already a grown-up. You're 13 now, which means you should keep track of time. Right?" "Right," Ruslan replied, still not understanding where I was going with this. "So, in honor of your birthday, please accept this gift from me," I said, extending a beautiful blue gift box. "Regardless of how your plan with your mom's meeting goes, let this day be a memorable one." "Thank you," Ruslan exclaimed with joy as he opened the box and saw the watch inside. I've never had my own watch. Well, I did have one, but it was just a toy watch. "Thank you so much, Petrovich." But then he hesitated. "What if my mom asks? If she has any questions, tell her to come and ask me, okay?" I replied, satisfied with Ruslan's reaction to the gift. After a few more minutes, Rewritten version. I previously mentioned that this situation occurred back in the middle of May, and since then, more than 1.5 months had passed. However, it wouldn't have continued if Karina hadn't visited me at my door the other day. She timidly asked for permission to enter and began asking awkward, leading questions. I immediately understood that she was referring to the watches, so I quickly invited her into the kitchen, where our conversation continued. Karenavka, don't worry. I gave you the watches, and no, Ruslan didn't ask for them. It was my decision, I reassured her with a smile. But they must be expensive, right? Karina asked, feeling embarrassed. Such expensive gifts for a boy to receive. It's normal and right when it comes from the heart, I interrupted, trying to ease her concerns. Maybe I should at least give you some of the money back. You can see that the watches are expensive. Karina continued, still feeling embarrassed. For a gift? I asked, surprised. There's absolutely no need for money. But why not? She questioned, surprised by my response. By chance, I discovered Ruslan's plan for his birthday. I cunningly continued. I wonder how it turned out. Did he succeed in what he had planned? Because I haven't seen him around at all this time. I couldn't even ask him. Karina breathed a sigh of relief, smiled, and happily shared what could be considered a continuation or even an ending to the story. I've never been married. When I got pregnant with Ruslan and went to his father to share the news, my mother-in-law opened the door. She was always against me. Actually, she was against all the girls her son brought home. As soon as I arrived, Larisa Sergeyevna informed me right from the doorstep that her son had gone to the parents of his real bride. She made it clear that I was not welcome in their house anymore. That's when Larisa Sergeyevna also mentioned that her son would no longer live there. He was moving in with his bride, so I should forget about him and say goodbye. That's how I ended up giving birth to Ruslan alone. Maybe I should have welcomed another man into our lives, but how? With his biological father still alive, it would be strange to call someone else daddy. So I decided it was better for Ruslan to not call anyone daddy at all. Even though Ruslan begged and asked about his father, what could I say? He was too young for me to explain that his dad had left us before he was even born. And then came Ruslan's birthday, his invited guests. I never could have imagined that he wanted to arrange a date for me. He left so quickly, and I went from the kitchen to the room, where I almost fainted. It was him. I stood there, speechless, unsure of what to say. And he sat there, equally silent. I thought maybe he didn't recognize me. But then it turned out that he had recognized me when Ruslanchik showed him our photos. So Valak asked me, "Where's your husband?" I replied, "What husband? There was never a husband." Karina paused, her voice filled with emotion. And then he started asking questions, wondering where Ruslanchik came from if there was no husband. That's when I told him my story, how I approached him, how I spoke to Larisa Sergeyevna. Valak responded with something you wouldn't believe. He said he never had a bride in his life either, the one his mother had mentioned. I hadn't seen her for a week before I went to him with the news of my pregnancy. As it turned out, Valak had a serious accident on his motorcycle and was in the hospital. Valak's mother saw this as an opportunity to keep me away, so she concocted a story about a bride and departure. Valak had spent over a year in hospitals and sanatoriums, undergoing traction and rehabilitation, and as soon as he was able to move independently, he decided to visit me. When he saw me from a distance with a stroller, he assumed I was happily married and decided not to approach us. Valak coincidentally ended up working at the school where Ruslanchik studies. After his accident, he couldn't work in many professions, but sedentary work suited him just fine. So he got a job at the school. When Ruslanchik started showing him our photos, Valak recognized me, but he believed I was divorced. It was only when we met in person that he discovered Ruslanchik was his son. Can you imagine? I burst into tears, either from happiness or from the realization that I had lived all those years without knowing the truth. We told Ruslan everything that same day. We were waiting for him. We were already worried since he wasn't answering his phone, although he later mentioned that he had been with you. When my son listened to our story, he said it was the best birthday present he could have ever wished for. And then the school year came to an end, so Ruslan and his father went to visit his grandparents. Well, Valak's parents, to be precise. They now live in the suburbs, drawn to the countryside life. Valak's mother was ecstatic to finally have a grandson, and she practically went crazy with joy. On the day the boys went to visit them, she even called and apologized, asking me to come back. I can't go just yet as I'm on vacation, but I'll definitely visit when they return. I stumbled upon the watch. I called Ruslan and asked him where it came from. He told me it was a gift and intentionally left it behind when they went to the village because he was afraid of losing or damaging it. He said he was waiting to wear the watch when the new school year begins. Well, Karinka, you can consider that you've paid for the watch, I said with a wide smile. Your story, by the way, is worth more to me than this watch. Oh, come on, Karina replied, feeling embarrassed. Tell me, is the wedding coming up soon? I curiously asked. The application has already been filed, so yes, it's coming soon, Karina answered eagerly. Well, I hope you'll invite me and Tonka. Maybe we can attend as a couple, I winked, playfully curious. Even more than that, I'm inviting you to the wedding, Karina said as we moved from the kitchen to the front door. We'll be celebrating in the suburbs, so get ready. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Sometimes it seems as though fate invents intricate tests for good-hearted people. It tests their fortitude and the strength of their decisions. Perhaps only those who endure and stay faithful to their choices ultimately receive their share of truth and a stream of happiness. We all live in our apartment buildings, often unaware of the tragic, joyful, and diverse destinies unfolding in the neighboring units. However, it brings great joy to know that someone is doing well, everything is in order, and happiness has found its place within those apartments.